Hey everyone! Today I'm going to be showing you how to crochet Blossom the heart flower. Blossom isn't your garden variety bloom. This heart flower hugs without a sound, spreading love and cheer silently but surely. So Blossom can be made in sport, DK, or plush weight yarn by adjusting your hook size. Today I'm going to be crocheting with worsted weight yarn and a 4mm crochet hook. If you haven't already, be sure to snag the matching greeting card to make an adorable and one-of-a-kind gift that your friends and family will love. Okay, let's go ahead and get started. Alright, so we're going to be making Blossom the heart flower, and we're going to begin by forming a magic ring with this beige colored yarn for the pot. So before we get started, let's review how to tie our magic ring. Okay, so let's review how to tie a magic loop. So to start, we're going to get about 5 inches of our tail of our working yarn. And then we need to form a bit of a finger guns here with our left hand. And then we're going to lay that tail so that the tail part of it is down over the bottom digit of our left hand. And then we're going to take our thumb and pinch that tail so it's on securely to our index and our middle finger. Then we're going to take the working yarn, and that's the yarn that's attached to the ball of yarn, and we're going to wrap it around the back side of those 2 fingers really close to the top digit. So I'm just wrapping around the back, and then I'm going to continue by pulling it behind my thumb. So I just made a big loop around my fingers. Then we're going to wrap a second time, but this time we're going to go around the lower digit on the back side of our left hand. And then one last time we're going to push that working yarn behind our thumb on our left hand. Then when we've done that, we can take our crochet hook and we're going to flip our left hand over so we can see those 2 loops that we formed. And then taking our crochet hook underneath that top loop, we're going to use the hook to grab that bottom loop and pull it underneath the top loop. Then when we've done that, we're going to flip our hands back over away from our body and then bring our hook and our left hand together. So you can see my fingers on my right hand are touching the back side of the hand with the loops on it. Then I'm going to take my right index finger and thumb and I'm going to grab those loops that are on the back side of my hand. So the one on the hook and the one on my hand. Once I've got those pinched rather securely, I'm going to let go with my thumb and then slide all of those loops very carefully off of my hand. Once I've done that, you can see I have my tail. Again, that's not attached to the ball of yarn. And then my working yarn. I'm going to move my tail out of my way, kind of just swing it around clockwise to the 12 o'clock position. And then I'm going to grab my working yarn and begin tensioning it by laying it over my left index finger and then grabbing the remaining yarn with my pinky and my ring finger. Then we need to be able to tension our yarn, so we're going to have to let go with our right hand. But before we do, we need to make sure we're pinching the loop that we've tied and our tail together. So if you look, I like to kind of pinch so that it sandwiches that working yarn. So I'm just going to pinch both that loop and that tail together here. And then when I've done that, I can let go with my right hand, and pulling my index finger up lets me tighten that loop on my hook. Then to lock our magic loop or magic ring in place, we can yarn over and draw through the loop on our hook. And that locks everything in place. You can let go with your left hand. You can even stop tensioning if you want. This loop isn't going to go anywhere now that we've locked it in place. One last thing that I like to do before I get started is I'll take the tail. You can see it's sort of threaded through the loop that we've made. I like to take this tail and pull it out so that I can go ahead and get started placing single crochet inside. Before you begin, we also need to make sure we are working both in the loop and over the tail of the magic ring as well. Alright, so we are ready to make our first single crochet stitch. Alright, so now that we have reviewed how to tie our magic ring, we're ready to start in on round 1. So remember, we're going to be working in both the ring of the magic ring and then over the tail of the magic ring for this first round. And we're going to begin by placing 8 single crochet stitches inside of this magic ring. So to make our first single crochet stitch, I'm going to take my hook and I'm going to slide it underneath both sides of that yarn, one from the magic ring, one from the tail, and then I'm going to yarn under. So I'm putting the yarn under my hook. I'm going to drag it through and up to form a loop, and then I'm going to yarn over and draw through both loops left on my hook. You can see that forms our first single crochet stitch. I also like to scoot the stitch over to the right a little bit, and then we need to mark this stitch as well because it is the first stitch of our round, and we always mark that when we're making an amigurumi piece. Alright, so that's our first single crochet. Let's make the next single crochet together. So again, we're going to take our hook, go underneath both sides, the magic ring and the tail, yarn under and draw up a tall loop. Then we're going to yarn over and draw through both loops left on our hook. We're going to keep adding single crochet stitches in this exact same way until we have 8 stitches total. Alright, so I have all 8 of my stitches, and you can double check that you have the correct amount by turning your work on its side and counting these little V's that the top of the stitch makes. So starting with the one that we put our marker in, I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. And we also don't ever count the loop on our hook as a stitch. Alright, so when you have all 8 of those stitches in your magic ring, it's time to do the magic part, which is we're going to take that tail that we've been working over, and we're going to pull tightly to close off our first round. That sets us up for round 2, where we're going to learn a new type of stitch called an INC, which means an increase. So we're going to go ahead and take that stitch marker out of our first stitch. And to make our first increase, we're going to go through where our marker just was, underneath both sides of that top of that stitch there. Yarn under and draw up a loop, and then yarn over and draw through. Of course, we need to mark that because it's the first stitch of our round. And then to finish our increase, we're going to go through that exact same stitch again. So just push our hook straight through the same stitch we already put our first single crochet in. Yarn under and draw up a loop, and then yarn over and draw through 2. And you can see that puts 2 stitches in the same place from the last round. So an increase is just putting 2 single crochet stitches in the same place. We're going to continue adding increases to every stitch in this round, and since we had 8, we should end with 16 stitches when we get to the end of the round. And if you look at the top left, you'll see the end of the instructions. There are numbers in parentheses. That is our stitch count. Alright, that wraps up round 2 for me. Before I move on to round 3, I'm going to give my magic ring tail one final pull, and then I'm going to take my scissors and cut it short but not off, so just give it a trim, because I find it gets in my way as I'm working. Alright, so we're ready for round 3, and we have our first series that we need to repeat. So if you look at the top left here, you can see we've got these parentheses, and inside it says 1 SC, 1 INC. And then outside of those parentheses, it has a multiplication sign and then the number 8. So let me translate that for you. That's saying that we're going to need to repeat the thing that's inside of those parentheses in the order that we see them 8 times total. So we're going to take our stitch marker out and start in on those parentheses by placing 1 single crochet stitch in the first stitch of the round, And then, of course, marking that stitch as it is the first stitch of the round. And then we're going to increase in the next stitch. And that is one repetition of those parentheses. So we need to repeat that another 7 times for a total of 8 repetitions. So we're going to go to the next stitch, add 1 single crochet, go into the next stitch, add an increase, and we're just going to keep working that same pattern until we are all the way around. Alright, so that wraps up round 3 for me. I'm ready to start in on round 4, and we've got a new set of parentheses. So we'll begin by putting 1 single crochet stitch in the first 2 stitches of the round. So here's my first. Then we'll put 1 single crochet stitch in the next. And then we're going to increase in the next stitch. And then if you look, that's 1 repetition of everything in the parentheses. We need to do that another 8 times until we are all the way around. So that's 1 single crochet, 1 single crochet, increase. Alright, so I'm ready for round 5, where we're going to start by placing 1 single crochet stitch in the first stitch of the round. And then we're going to follow that with an increase. And then we've got our next set of parentheses that we need to repeat, which is to put 1 single crochet stitch in the next 3 stitches of the round. And then increase in the next stitch. And then we're going to repeat that same sequence another 6 times for a total of 7 repetitions. And we're going to end with 2 stitches left in our round. Alright, I'm at my last 2 stitches of the round, and all we need to do is put 1 single crochet in each. Alright, so for round 6 we need to learn a new kind of stitch, and that's called a BPSC, which stands for back post single crochet stitch. So to make a back post single crochet, we're going to be making our single crochet stitch just like normal. So by going through the stitch, yarning under, drawing through, yarning over, drawing through. However, we're going to be going through a different place on our stitch. So I'm going to take my stitch marker out so I can show where we're going to be going through. So when we form our stitches, they have these little bits that connect them to the V and then to the row below. And a single crochet stitch, this little part here, this is called the post. And the way we're going to work through the back post is that we need to actually grab our stitch in this area, so we're not getting it from the little V at the top, we're grabbing it by the stitch itself, like the meat that forms the stitch. So to get the back post, we're going to have to approach the post of the stitch from the back of our work. So this is also a good time to talk about the front and back side. The back has our little magic ringtail hanging out on it, and has all these little lines that you can see. The front of our work has got these tidy X's, and then there's no magic ringtail poking through. So to access the back post of our single crochet stitch, we're going to take our hook, and I like to line up first that I'm looking at the right stitch. We're going to push the hook through the fabric of the work underneath sort of where that stitch is, and then come back up so we just get the meat of the stitch. So it's the stuff underneath the top that we've been working through. So let me show you that again. So to get the back post, we're going to take our hook and we're going to go from the back underneath that stitch and then grab just the, as you can see here, the front part of that stitch. So I'm going through and only getting the meat, the inside of the stitch. And then when I do that, I'm going to just single crochet like normally. So yarn under, draw up a loop, yarn over and draw up a loop. Let me show you my next couple of stitches so you can kind of see, getting the hang of what it looks like. So I'm going to slip behind and I'm grabbing just the post of each stitch. Alright, so I am all the way around that back post single crochet round, and you can see it leaves this little loop kind of here on the outside of our work, which is what we want. And then for rounds 7 through 9, all we need to do is put one single crochet stitch in every stitch all the way around. So I will see you back here whenever I get a little closer to the end of round 9. Alright, I just wrapped up round 9 and I'm ready for round 10, where we're going to start another series of parentheses pattern. So we're going to begin by placing one single crochet stitch in the next 19 stitches. Alright, so I've got my first 19 stitches of this round, so then after those first 19, we're going to increase in the next stitch. Then we're going to repeat that pattern one more time, so 19 single crochet stitches. Alright, so that was round 10 done. I'm ready for round 11, where all I need to do is put one single crochet stitch in every stitch all the way around. Alright, so I'm ready for round 12, where I'm going to put one single crochet stitch in the next 6 stitches of the round. And then after those first 6, I'm going to increase the next stitch. And then repeat that series, that sequence, another 5 times for a total of 6 repetitions. Alright, so for rounds 13 and 14, all we need to do is put one single crochet stitch in every stitch all the way around. So I will see you back here whenever I have wrapped up round 14. Alright, so I just wrapped up round 14 and I'm ready to put my safety eyes in. So I'm going to take my hook and I'm going to pull that last stitch up long. And then I'm going to take my work and I'm going to rotate it so that my stitch marker and my active stitch are at the back. Then it says that our eyes need to be between rounds 9 and 10. So I'm going to find rounds 9 and 10 first, starting by counting backwards from round 14, as that was the last round we just made. So 14, 13, 12, 11, 10. and then between rounds 9 and 10. Then I'm going to be using these painted safety eyes. They have this little white shiny embellishment on them. And since my painted safety eyes are a little bigger, I'm actually going to scoot my eyes up one round. So that's between rounds 10 and 11. So 14, 13, 12, 11, 10. I'm going to place mine through here. So you just push the eye through the space in between the rounds of your choosing. And then our second eye is about 4 stitches apart from our first eye. So we're going to count 1, 2, 3, 4 stitches and then place that second eye. And then of course feel free to move these eyes. Sometimes I find that I like them a little closer together or further apart. And you can play around with it so that it looks just the way that you'd like. But once you have the eyes placed, you can take the little plastic backs that go on the underside of them and snap them on. And then at this point in the pattern, we're also going to take either a little scrap of cardboard or some hard plastic and put it at the bottom of our pot. I use these little cardboard circles that I've cut from old shipping boxes. I'm just going to take it and I'm going to slot it here at the very bottom of the pot. This is optional, you don't necessarily need to do this, but we're going to insert some floral wire inside for our heart, and this little piece of plastic or cardboard keeps the floral wire from poking out of the bottom of the pot. So while it's not needed, I really recommend doing it. Alright, so then we're ready to continue on with our pot, and we need to do a color change first. So we're going to take that last stitch that we made in round 14, and then we're going to actually pull that stitch out. Because to do our color change, we need to finish the last stitch in our new color, which is this kind of dark brown for our soil. So let's finish off that last stitch most of the way. So again, I'm going to go through, yarn under, and draw up a loop. And then to change colors, we're going to cut our old color with about a 3-inch tail. And then start our new color by pulling the new color through those last 2 loops. And then to tighten that stitch down, we're going to pull the tail from our old color and then the tail from our new color. Alright, so we're going to be working both in the next stitch and over these tails for our next round, which is round 15. So I'm going to take my marker out, and we're going to be working in the back loops only for round 16. So as you've been working, you've been going through both sides of these stitches, so like underneath both sides of that little V. For a back loop only stitch, we're just going to go through the one on the back, closest to the inside of our work. So we're going to make our first back loop only single crochet by going just in between those 2 sides of the stitch and grabbing just the back one, and then laying our tails from our new color over our hook, and then making our single crochet as normal, yarning under. We're also going to mark that stitch, even though it's pretty obvious since it's the new color. It is the first stitch of the round, so let's mark it. And then we need to make another 5 back loop only single crochet stitches. So I'm going to keep working, going through the next back loop, also getting those 2 tails on my hook. I'm going to work those tails in one more stitch, and then I can leave them behind now because they're worked in and they're not going to come undone. So that's 3. Let's continue making single crochet stitches in the back loop only. Alright, so there's my first 6 back loop only single crochet stitches. Now we need to make a back loop only decrease. So to do that, we're going to go through the next back loop of our next stitch, yarn under and draw up a loop, and then do that exact same thing in the next back loop. So go through, yarn under and draw up a loop, And then we're going to go through all 3 of these loops. So yarn over and draw through everything left on your hook. And we're going to continue that sequence of 6 back loop only single crochet stitches. And then a back loop only single crochet decrease. And we'll keep working around until we have finished this round. Alright, so we're ready for round 16. We're going to be working back in the regular part of our stitch. And we're going to place 5 single crochet stitches. So here's my first. And remember, we're working through both loops now, not just the back loop. Alright, when you got your first 5 single crochet, then we're going to make a regular single crochet decrease. So we're going to go through our next stitch both loops, yarn under and draw up a loop, then do the same thing in the next stitch, yarn under and draw up a loop, and then draw through all 3. And then we're going to repeat that same sequence, 5 single crochet decrease, another 5 times for a total of 6 till we're all the way around. Alright, so we're ready for round 17, where we're going to put 1 single crochet stitch in the next 4 stitches of the round. And then decrease in the next stitch. And then repeat that sequence of 4 single crochet decrease, another 5 times for a total of 6 all the way around. Alright, so for round 18, we're going to place 1 single crochet stitch in the next 3 stitches of the round. And then decrease in the next stitch. And then repeat that same sequence 5 times more for a total of 6 until we're all the way around. Alright, so for round 19, we're going to begin by placing 1 single crochet stitch in the next 2 stitches of the round. And then decreasing the next stitch. And then just like all the previous rounds, we're going to repeat that pattern 5 more times for a total of 6 until we're all the way around. Alright, so for round 20, we're back in the back loops only for this round. So we're going to place our first single crochet stitch in the back loop of the first stitch of the round. And then we're going to decrease in the back loop only of this round. And we'll repeat that same sequence another 5 times. Alright, so before we complete round 21, which is our last round on the pot, we need to stuff the inside. So let's go ahead and pull our last loop on our hook long. And then as we stuff, we need to be careful not to stuff that or the active yarn into our plush. So we're going to go ahead and grab some of our stuffing and then add it to the inside of the pot here. Alright, that is the pot stuffed for me. So let's go ahead and take our hook and put it back in that loop. and then pull our working yarn to draw that loop down. And then for round 21, our last round here, all we need to do is decrease in every stitch all the way around. And we are back in both loops of the stitch, not just the back loop. Alright, that's my last decrease, so we're ready to fasten off. Let's go ahead and take our stitch marker out. And then we're going to slip stitch to the stitch that our marker was just in. So go through from front to back just like a normal stitch. Yarn under and draw up a loop. And then we're going to just pull that loop straight through the last loop on our hook to slip stitch. Then we're ready to sew the opening closed by cutting a tail to sew with, maybe 5 or 6 inches. Then pulling that last loop on our hook all the way out until our yarn comes out. And then we're going to tighten that last stitch down by pulling our working yarn. Then we need to sew through the remaining 6 stitches of that last round. So we're going to take that tail that we've just cut, thread the tail through our yarn needle, and then we're going to sew through the front loop only of every stitch in this last round. So we've been working in the back loops a lot. We're going to just get the one on the front or the surface of that and sew through, kind of whip stitching our yarn around. Then when you've sewn through all 6 of those stitches, you can pull gently but firmly to close the top of our piece off. And then we're going to tie a surface knot by looping our tail over the surface of our work, sewing down into a little of the fabric and then up through the loop that we tied. And then holding that loop close, pull our tail until it ties a knot. Then we're going to sew our tail in by sewing it down into the soil and then into just some random place on the pot. That weaves the tail in. Then we're going to pull that tail tight and use our scissors to snip it close to the fabric of the work. You can discard this tail, and that wraps up the soil on the pot. Alright, so let's next wrap up the brim of our pot. So we're going to take our hook and we're going to insert it into one of the front loops left behind from that back loop only round that we did. So we're just going to slide our hook straight through, and then taking some of that same color that we used on our pot, we'll leave ourselves a little bit of a tail, but then wrap that yarn around our hook and then pull that loop through that front loop. And then we're ready to get started on crocheting this border on our pot. So I like to work this tail in as I go, so like I did with the tail on the color change and the tail on the magic ring, I'm going to just hold it over each of these loops as I work. So to make the first round of our brim here, we're going to start by placing 7 single crochet stitches, one in the next 7 loops. So I'm going to slip right underneath that loop and then also grab my tail and then just make a single crochet stitch like I normally would. Of course, I'm going to mark this stitch too, as it's the first one of our round. And I'm going to keep adding single crochet stitches, getting that tail underneath there as well, until I have 7 total. Then when you have your first 7 single crochet stitches, we're going to increase in the next loop. And I've worked this tail in over 9 stitches now. I'm going to go ahead and give it a trim so it's not in my way anymore. And we're going to continue that pattern of 7 single crochet increase until we're all the way around. Alright, so I am all the way around and I'm ready for my second round, which is we're going to just slip stitch through every stitch of round 1. So I'll go through my next stitch, yarn under and draw up a loop, and then pull that loop straight through the loop left on my hook. Of course, we're going to want to mark that slip stitch as it is the first of our round. But then we're going to just continue slip stitching in every stitch all the way around. Alright, that was my last slip stitch, so I'm ready to finish this round by slip stitching to that first slip stitch that we made. Then we'll cut a tail, 5 or 6 inches or so. Pull that last slip stitch all the way through. Tighten it down just like we did with the soil when we were done. And then we're going to weave this tail in as well by threading it through our tapestry needle. I'm going to sew from front to back through that last layer, and then sew through a little bit of the layer of the brim and then into the soil of the pot, and then just out through a random spot in the soil. Then I'll pull that tail tight and cut. And that wraps up the brim of our pot, so let's get the smile embroidered next. Alright, so we're going to get the pot's smile embroidered on next. So I went ahead and threaded my embroidery needle with some embroidery floss, and then tied a knot at the end of the floss. I'm going to send this down into the soil because it's darker in color and should help hide any part of the embroidery floss. And then I'm going to send the embroidery needle down to the inside corner of my left eye. I'll pull tight to kind of get the embroidery floss's knot to go through, and then I'll just trim this tail whenever I'm all done sewing. Alright, so to sew the first part of the mouth, I'm going to sew over this row directly underneath the eye, just a long stitch that's slightly to the inside of the mouth. So at a little bit of an angle. And then I'm going to take my needle and come up next to the other eye. And then sew that exact same shape on this side. And then come up through where the other side is. And then I'm just going to sew a straight stitch in the space between this round and this round here to finish off the smile. Then I'll send my embroidery floss back up into the soil. So that makes a nice smile for our flower pot. And to finish off, we're going to tie a surface knot with our embroidery floss, just like we did when we were finishing off the soil, looping that floss over, sewing up through some of the fabric and that loop, and pulling tight. And then we're going to weave this embroidery floss in just by sewing into the soil and out through a random spot. And then trim any tail left over, both from the embroidery floss knot and from the tail that we just wove in. Alright, that is the smile added. Alright, so before we even get started with the heart, I wanted to show you what I'm using to support the heart. So I have just a little length of floral wire, and I buy pre-cut length. So this is about 18 inches or so. And I like to fold this pre-cut length in half and then cinch it here along the top. And then I'll take that and double it over itself again, and then flatten it again at the top. And then I like to put floral wire inside of a lot of my pieces for structure reasons. So this is how I like to add them. I'll take this length and I'll start maybe half an inch from the top and twist all of the sections of it together, making sure it's really tightly twisted. And the reason I don't twist all the way to the top is because I like to make a little T shape out of these two loops. And this part's going to hide inside of the heart we make. And then we'll wrap yarn around this part here at the bottom. Right, so that's how I like to use my floral wire to support amigurumi pieces. You don't need to do this. This is just something tried and true that I prefer. I'm going to begin with the pink yarn and of course another magic ring. And then once that magic ring is tied, we're going to go ahead and add 6 single crochet stitches to the inside. Once we've got those first 6 single crochet stitches added to our magic ring, we're going to pull the tail to close the ring off. Then for round 2, we're going to increase in each stitch. Alright, once we've done that, I'm going to go ahead and give my magic ring tail another tug and then trim. And then for round 3, which is the last round that we've got for this first half of the heart, we're going to just put 1 single crochet stitch in each of the 12 stitches from round 2. Alright, so that's my last stitch there. I'm going to go ahead and take my stitch marker out. And for the first part of the heart, we need to fasten off. So I'm going to slip stitch through that marker stitch, the one that we just took the marker out of. And then cut a short tail and pull that through. And then we need to weave that tail in for this first half of the heart. So go ahead and thread it through your tapestry needle. And then to weave it in, I'm just going to sew down through some of the stitches inside of the heart. It's going to keep it out of our way whenever we're ready to start by joining the two halves together. Alright, so we need to make another one of these heart halves. So let's go ahead, form our magic ring again. Then just like last time, we're going to put 6 single crochet stitches in that magic ring. Pull that magic ring tail to close. Increase in each stitch all the way around. Alright, I'm going to give that magic ring tail snip just like last time. And then I'm ready to start round 3 on this half of the heart, which is just to put 1 single crochet stitch in every stitch all the way around. Alright, so that's my last stitch of this round, and then we're going to join the heart sides together. So I'm going to take that stitch marker out, and then I'm going to grab that other half of heart that I made, and I'm going to slip stitch through where I slip stitched and fastened off on that other half of heart. So I'll just go right through that stitch there, bring it all the way down on my hook. Then I'm going to take my working yarn and I'm going to slip stitch the halves of heart together. And that joins the two of them. So we're going to work around putting 1 single crochet stitch in each of the 12 stitches around this half of the heart. So here's my first, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and that last slip stitch itself is our last stitch. So I'm just going to go right through And then we're going to do the same thing on the other side here. We're going to go through all 12 stitches on this half of the heart. So I'm going to go through my next stitch here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and the last stitch, 12. Alright, so for round 5 of the heart, we're going to place 4 single crochet stitches in the next 4 stitches of the round. So here's my first. And then we're going to start marking that as well. So we're going to mark that stitch we've just made. 1, 2, 3, 4 single crochet. And then we're going to single crochet 3 stitches together. It's a lot like when we decrease, but it's just got an extra stitch roped in. So we'll go through the next stitch, yarn under and draw up a loop. Go through the next stitch, yarn under, draw up a loop. And then do that one last time, next stitch, yarn under, draw up a loop. Then yarn over and draw through all of the loops left on your hook. Then we're going to place 1 single crochet stitch in the next 9 stitches around. So here's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Be really careful not to miss the stitches where the 2 heart sides join together. They kind of fold on themselves, so just double check that you're placing them in the right place. So here's that stitch. It's a little hard to see sometimes. So this is 6 for me. 7, 8, and 9. Then just like before on this half of the heart, we're going to single crochet 3 stitches together. Draw up a loop, draw up a loop, 1 more, then draw through all. And then we're going to place 1 single crochet in the remaining 5 stitches of this half of the heart. 2, 3, 4, and 5. Alright, so that wraps up round 5. Round 6, we're going to start by placing 1 single crochet stitch in the next 3 stitches of the round. So here's my first. So once you've got those first 3 single crochet, we're going to single crochet 3 together again. So here's my first, second, and third, and then yarn over and draw through all. Then we're going to put 1 single crochet stitch in the next 7 stitches. Then another single crochet 3 together. And then 4 single crochet stitches to close off the round, 1 in each of the 4 remaining stitches. Alright, round 7, we'll start by placing 1 single crochet stitch in the next 2 stitches of the round. Then we've got another single crochet 3 together. Then 1 single crochet in the next 5 stitches. Another single crochet 3 together. and then 1 single crochet in the next 3 stitches of the round. Alright, so we've got 1 round left on our heart. I'm going to go ahead and pull this last stitch up long and add a little stuffing to the inside because this last round is just decreasing and I find it's hard to stuff through. So let's go ahead and stuff the inside of our heart balloon now. Alright, that's the heart stuffed, so let's go ahead and finish that last round. So I'm going to put my hook back in and draw my loop back down. So round 8, all we need to do is decrease in each stitch all the way around. Alright, so I just wrapped up round 8 of the heart and I'm ready to fasten off. So I'm going to take my stitch marker out. I'm going to go through my next stitch and slip stitch. And then I'm going to cut a medium length tail. We need just enough to sew the bottom of the heart closed. So I'll go ahead and cut 5 or 6 inches and then pull that last stitch through and tighten. And before we finish off the bottom of our heart, we're going to come back and finish the stem part here. So here's that piece of floral wire that I prepped. I'm going to go ahead and grab the color that I'm using for both the leaf and the stem. So for me it's sort of this lime green color here. And I'm going to start by pinching the yarn in between where I have this little T shape at the top of the floral wire. And I'm just going to tie the top of this together. I know our pattern says to use hot glue, but I find that makes a little bit of a mess. And if you wrap just right, you don't need to use any glue to secure this at all. So now that this is tied, I'm going to make sure that little tail stays up at the top because that's going to hide out inside of the heart. And then I'm going to just hold my green color yarn while I twirl this floral wire. And I'm not going to pull too tightly. Nice loose wraps to cover the floral wire in this green color for the stem. Alright, so I am close to the end of the floral wire, and the way I like to finish off wrapping is I'm going to cut a medium tail, 6 inches or so, and then I'm going to thread this tail through one of my smaller metal tapestry needles. And the reason I like to leave a little loop here at the end of my floral wire, as you can see right here, is I like to take that last wrap and pass it through that loop and then just come back through and tie a bit of a knot, which will hold that wrap in place without having to use any glue. You can of course put a dab of hot glue here at the end if you'd like, but I prefer not to since this is just going to slip inside of the pot itself. Alright, so now that I've got that done, we're ready to attach it to our heart. So I'm going to start by giving this top tail a little trim. And then I'll wedge one side of that floral wire inside of the heart and then sort of bend this other piece so that it fits inside. And then make sure that that tail is also tucked inside of the heart itself too. Once I've done that, I can take the tail from the heart, thread it through my tapestry needle, and then we're going to sew through each of the 6 remaining front loops, just like we did on the soil. I'm going to pull that tail tight, and pulling it tight actually cinches all of those stitches around our stem, which should help keep it in place. Then we're going to tie another surface knot up with this pink here, and weave that pink into the heart itself. Cut that tail. And then we're going to take this heart and actually put it inside of our pot. So I like to start by weaving in this green tail at the bottom of the stem first. And I'm going to send it directly down into that magic loop, magic ring opening that we have. And then just out through a random spot. And then I'm going to follow behind that with the stem of the flower. And you have to kind of twist and push, but it will go into that same place and then finish weaving in that tail. And that little strip of cardboard or plastic we put inside keeps that from poking out through. And then if you want this to be extra secure, I would put a dab of hot glue. Alright, so that is the flower in the pot. Let's get the leaf crocheted and added, and then we'll be all done with this tutorial. Alright, so we're getting ready to start in on the leaf. So first up we need to tie a slip knot, so let's review how to tie a slip knot. Alright, so let's review how to start with a slip knot and chains. So the way I like to tie my slip knots is I'm going to take my yarn and I'm going to take the tail part and about 5 inches or so of that tail part, and I'm going to fold it behind the working yarn. I also like to pinch my fingers inside of that loop, so I'll put my index in middle, or I can wrap my pinky and my really whatever fingers you want to wrap inside. So once you've crossed that behind and then you've made a little bit of a loop, we're going to fold that tail over and wedge it in between some of those fingers we have inside of the loop. Then when we've done that, our goal is to pull this strand through without pulling all of the tail through as well, because that's just going to tie a regular knot. We're going to use this loop we formed to sort of pinch the tail into a loop that we can tighten or loosen as we need. So to do that, I'm going to grab both the working yarn and that tail, and then I'm going to use my fingers to sort of pull that tail end through, and then by tightening both the working yarn and the tail and then pulling that loop, I form a slip knot. Now the reason I like to tie them this way is because they tighten whenever you pull the tail, but they don't tighten whenever you pull the working yarn. So that way whenever you start tensioning, it's not going to pull your loop really tightly closed. And then when we weave this tail in, it secures that first stitch. It also allows us to tighten that stitch too, so if we add a lot of stitches to this slip knot that we've tied, we have the ability to tighten it after the fact. So let's practice that one last time, so we can just pull that slip knot out. And again, we're going to take about 5 inches or so of our tail, and we're going to wrap it behind our working yarn, and bring it and wedge it in between our fingers that are inside that loop we've made. And then by pulling that working yarn and that loop through, can tie our slip knot. Once we've got it tied, then we're ready to go ahead and begin chaining. So we can grab our crochet hook, put it inside of that slip knot we've tied, and then by tugging the tail, we can tighten it down on our hook. Then we're ready to start chaining however many stitches we need to chain for our pattern. So to chain, it's a lot like a slip stitch. We're just going to take our working yarn and yarn over and pull it straight through and up. And the goal when we chain is to make these loops all the same size. So try not to make them too tight, but also try not to pull them up too long or you'll have a really loose chain. Alright, that's how we'll start when we tie a slip knot and chain. Alright, so I have my slip knot tied, so we're ready to begin chaining, and we need to chain 7 stitches. So there are my 7 stitches chained. So we're going to start in the second chain from the hook. So remember, we don't ever count what's here on our hook. So 1, 2, and we're going to place a single crochet stitch in this chain. Then in the next stitch we're going to half double crochet, so we'll start by wrapping our yarn around our hook, going through our next stitch, then yarning under. Then we're going to yarn over and draw through all 3 loops on our hook. Then in the next stitch we're going to double crochet, so again, wrap our yarn around our hook, go through our next stitch, yarn under and draw up a loop, then yarn over and draw through 2 loops, then yarn over and draw through the last 2 loops. Then we're going to make another half double crochet stitch by yarning around our hook, going through our next stitch, yarning under and drawing up a loop, then yarning over and drawing through all 3. In the next stitch we're going to make a single crochet, so yarn under, yarn over, and then in that slip knot we tied we need to place 1 single crochet, 1 chain, and then another single crochet. So we're going to go through single crochet, chain 1 stitch, and then we're actually going to be working on the other side of this chain. So I'm going to place my other single crochet through the other side and grab my slip knot tail as well, and then single crochet. So that flips us around the other side of our chain where we're ready to continue adding stitches. So on the other side of the chain we're going to place 1 single crochet stitch, then 1 half double crochet stitch, then 1 double crochet stitch, then 1 half double crochet stitch, then 1 single crochet, and then we're going to slip stitch to that first single crochet that we made, so kind of across the way here, to close off our leaf. Then we're going to cut ourselves a medium length tail and pull that last slip stitch all the way out and tighten down. I wove my tail in as I went, so I'm going to give that a trim. And we are ready to attach it to our flower pot. So we're going to go ahead and grab that, thread the tail of our leaf through our tapestry needle, and then I'm going to attach it right down here in the soil, right by the stem. Also through the other side of the leaf. And then I'm also going to attach it a little bit to the stem itself by grabbing some of the wraps on the stem, just passing right through those, and then come back through the other side of the leaf. And then we can weave this tail in by tying a surface knot here on the surface of the leaf. And then weaving that tail into the soil of the flower pot. You can cut that loose. And with that final snip, that wraps up Blossom the Heart Flowers tutorial.